about 5'7".
You're
It's my
5'7"?
level.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's my level.
Well, I have some things here. We'll get into later, but we're just checking the things. Does that look pretty good?
Sure. So are people going to be able to listen to this and actually ask questions?
Yeah,
That's kind of
yeah.
cool.
It's
I mean, that's
it's
kind of cool. Do people do that?
apparently I still haven't figured out the technology. We're still trying to like figure out the best way of doing this. But right now, yeah, in theory, you can like listen or watch this thing on YouTube at a certain time, and then if you want to type in questions, there's a chat room or a chat box or something. You can just write in things and.
So are people going to ask like boxers or briefs?
Well, I hope so.
Could you? Yeah, could you make sure that somebody
sure.
does?
Okay. We have a call. Somebody wants to know about boxers or briefs. We can bring that up. You can decide if you want to answer that or not. But okay. So let me just set this up.
I'll answer most anything.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been asked a question I wouldn't answer.
Okay.
There's probably one out there somewhere.
Let's see what's going on here. I'm just setting this up. How does that sound? Then
you gotta get to your mic again.
Oh yeah. Okay. So Brandon is our engineer here, and he's checking our levels to make sure that they are accurate and legal.
Where are you guys at in California?
We're in Burbank, California, at Woodbury University.
Beautiful downtown Burbank.
Yeah, we're kind of up the street from there, near the airport.
And, I know it well. I used to live there.
Yeah. So we're just doing this right now. Let's see. Okay. Is it good? All good. Okay, we're on the air. All right, great. Okay, thanks, Brandon. Okay, so I'm just gonna see if this is actually coming through here, and let's see. Looks like it is. So I have a blog called Animateducated. It's a kind of an odd spelling of two words put together, but I put your information, a little bit of your information, mainly this link to this blogcast, so people could see it if they went there too. So you're just all over the place, You're just you're everywhere. So yes, you're omnipotent here. Oh, well, somnipotent, I don't know. But let's see. Just to make sure I got all that on, and we'll start this. But
do you want me to put that site on my computer while we're talking?
If you want, it's.
I mean, is there any reason why I should?
I mean, it's not gonna. You'll see me, and I'll be putting graphics up there. If you want, it's okay.
It'll just be distracting.
Yeah, you might be staring at it, going, "Wow,
wow,
is that the hat I used to wear?" So, well, I remember that hat or whatever. Okay, I'm just checking this just to see, and it looks like it's on there. Okay. All right. Well, looks like it's on there. So, yeah, and people can go to YouTube. Seems like it's on. All right. Okay. So I'll just start this now. Welcome everybody. This is the Animateducated Ambassador Good Time Ear Tango Radio Hour. And today we have a very special guest, Gary K. Wolf, the author of Who Censored Roger Rabbit, that suddenly became, Who Framed Roger Rabbit as a feature film. And you're in Boston, right, Gary?
I am in Boston. Yes, I am.
Okay, so you started out as a kid in Earlville.
Earlville, Illinois.
Yeah.
I believe if you look on a map, you will find that Earlville is the exact center of the universe.
Yeah.
At least it was when I was living there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a small town in Illinois, and
1,400 people when I was living there, and I think it's now lost to 2, so it's like 1,398. My father ran the pool hall there, and my mother didn't run. She worked in the high school and grade school cafeteria.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So you grew up there, and did you get into art or drawing or writing as a small kid, or was that?
Well, yeah, I did. I'm not an artist. I'm a writer. And when I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade, this kind of combines both writing and art, but my teacher gave us a picture to color. It was a coloring exercise. And the whole point of the exercise was to stay inside the lines. That was all you had to do, stay inside the lines. And I mean, there was nobody better at staying inside the lines than I was. So this picture, I took a look at it. It was the typical farm scene. There was a farmhouse. There was a barn. There was a pasture with a cow, one cow in the middle of it. So I took the picture home and I colored the farmhouse yellow, which was the color that farms were around Illinois, which was a farm town basically. I colored the barn red, which of course farms were red, and I looked at that cow. And my mother had always told me that when people were all by themselves, and alone, that they got sad and lonely and they got blue. And I looked at that poor, sad, lonely cow all alone out there in the middle of the field. I colored that cow blue. I handed the paper in the next day, and the day after that, the teacher passed them all back to everybody except me. She did not pass mine back. And she said, Gary, come up here to the front of the room. And she made me go up to the front of the room, and she said, now turn around and face the class. And I did, and she held my picture up over my head, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, man, I stayed inside the lines better than anybody.
Yeah, right.
You know? And my teacher said to me, she said, class, look at this stupid picture. She said, everybody knows that cows are brown, cows are black, cows are white. Cows are sometimes brown, black, and white, all three together. Never are cows blue. She called my mother, and my mother had to go to school. And the teacher told my mother, she said, I think there's something wrong with Gary. He colored a cow blue. I think maybe he needs some psychiatric help.
Oh, no.
And so that night, my mother and my father called me into the living room, and my mother said to me, she said, Gary, why did you color that cow blue? I had to go to school. Why did you color that cow blue? And I said, Ma, it was you. You told me, people sad and lonely, they were blue. Cow, sad and lonely, I colored the cow blue. So she said, all right. She says, you go outside and you play for a while. Your dad and I are going to have to talk this over. Now, like I told you, these were not what we call today upscale, well-educated urban liberals. My dad dropped out of school in the 3rd grade to go to work during the Depression. And my mother dropped out of school in the 8th grade, and she had to go to work. They basically, my dad would read hard-boiled crime mysteries. My mother would read True Love confession magazines. I didn't think this was going to have a very happy ending for me. So, about a half hour later, my mother called me back in, and she said, Gary, she said, your father and I talked about this, and we both decided that the next time you want to color a cow blue, you go ahead and color a cow blue. And I've gone on to color a whole lot of cows blue since then. I still have that picture. It's hanging over my desk. I'm actually looking at it right now.
Oh, that's nice.
About 2-3 weeks later, that same teacher asked me to write a story about what I did on my summer vacation. And so I wrote this story about how I went into my backyard and built a rocket ship out of tin cans and went to the moon. The teacher read it, handed it back, and said, good work.
Oh, nice.
So there you go.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, that's good. At least she could see good, something, useful there.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think back then there was a lot of that. I remember as a kid, the whole coloring in the lines, and my mom's an artist, so she would be like, don't color in through the lines. Don't do it. Do whatever you want,
Yeah.
But
your mom and my mom would have been good buddies.
Yeah. So so you got into writing, and you didn't just start off with Roger Rabbit. You did a few other books before then. Is that right?
I did. I was a big fan of science fiction. I just loved science fiction, and I started writing short stories when I was in the Air Force. I was an air commando in the Air Force, and I was going to get out of the Air Force, and I had a year actually here in Boston, where I really didn't have a whole lot to do. And uh, my fiance, who is now my wife, I used to write poems to her, and it was really pretty much doggerel. I mean, roses are red, violets are blue kind of stuff, as I recall. It was nothing great. But she said, you really, I enjoy reading your poems. You should try writing a short story. So I wrote a short story. It was 50 pages long, and it took me a year to write that short story. I'm not a fast writer. I'm a good writer, but not a fast writer. And so I sent it off to a science fiction magazine called Worlds of Tomorrow, and didn't hear anything. So I figured that was the way the publishing industry worked. It must be in a trash can someplace. And so I started writing another short story, and by golly, a year went by, and I get a telegram. Like this is, like this is the world-shaking, most important news in the world. And I get this telegram saying, "Well, we would like to publish your short story, and we'll pay you $1 a page." It was 50 pages long, so I was going to make $50 on this. And if you accept, just sign this telegram, put it in an envelope, and send it back, and we'll send you your $50. And I was as happy about that as I was about any piece of writing I've sold since, because that meant that I really was an honest to God published author. Somebody had actually paid me real money for something I'd written. So I decided I was going to go out and buy myself an authorly wardrobe. And by that time, I'd gotten out of the service. I'd gone to grad school, and we were living in San Francisco. And this was San Francisco in the 60s, which was a kind of a wild and crazy place. So I went to Upper Grant Street, which is where the what you would call now the hippie boutiques were located, and I bought myself actually a pretty classy tweed jacket with leather sleeves like real writers wear, and a black turtleneck like all the hippie poets were wearing around Upper Grant Street, and a custom-made pair of leather pants, which I can still fit into. Although they are wide bell bottoms, and I can't wear them anytime outside of Halloween. But the whole wardrobe wound up setting me back $375. So on my first short story, I was 3 1/4 in the red, but it did look like a writer. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I put up a couple things. Something called Killer Bowl.
Killer Bowl, my first novel.
Was that the first one? Okay.
That was my first novel. Yeah, I had written a whole ton of short stories, which you can find in my collection of short stories called The Road to Toontown. If you go on Amazon, you can find it there, or go to my website, www.garywolf.com. You can get it there. All my early short stories are collected in that book. And I had written a ton of them, and I realized that instead of writing 12 short stories, I could write one novel for the same amount of time, and probably make a whole lot more money, and become more successful and better known as a writer. So I wrote Killer Bowl, which to this day is, if you go to a science fiction conference, not a Disney conference, a science fiction conference, and I go there, I am known as the guy who wrote Killer Bowl. I am not known as the guy who wrote Roger Rabbit.
Oh,
I'm
that's
known as
funny.
the guy who wrote Killer Bowl.
Ah.
Killer Bowl is probably my most famous and successful science fiction short story. I still get 20 or 30 letters every month from fans who read Killer Bowl, either for the first time or the second time, or one lucky guy for the 12th time, telling me what a great novel that is. And I'm kind of pleased that it's kind of having a resurgence now. There's some talk about making it into a movie. There's a company over in England that's going to turn it into a table game using lead figures.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's my most famous novel. I sold it to Doubleday, and Doubleday gave me a contract for a second novel, anything I wanted to write. So I wrote a novel called A Generation Removed, sent that to them. They published it, gave me a contract for a third novel. Anything I wanted to write, they would publish. So I wrote a novel called The Resurrectionist, which they did publish, and which is also having a resurgence now. There's talk about making that into a movie and a TV series and a holographic interactive video game.
Oh, wow.
So they gave me a contract for a fourth novel. And for the fourth novel, I decided I wanted to really push the envelope and do something that nobody had ever done before.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to incorporate the three real loves of my life, which were comic books, cartoons, and noir mysteries. And I got the love of comic books because, my mother, again, wise woman that she was, told me that if I wanted to get out of Earlville and did not want to wind up living there for the rest of my life and running my dad's pool hall, the one thing I could do to make that happen was to read. She said, just read, and that will get you out of here.
Wow.
And, wise woman that she was, she never put any restrictions on what I could or should read. So, what I read? I read what kids read. I read comic books. And I used to go to the local theater every day. I went because it was only like 14 cents to go, and I would go every day and watch the cartoons. And then my dad, as I said, read what they call true crime mysteries, and they I don't know if there's an equivalent today, but they were magazines that showed real crime scenes in graphic detail with pictures. So you saw dead bodies, and you saw, people who had been killed by machine guns in warehouses in Cicero, Illinois. And but I read those, and luckily I found the kind of fictional equivalent, which were noir mysteries, Philip Marlowe and Dashiell Hammett, Mike Hammer, Mickey Spillane. And I loved noir mysteries. So I was looking for something that I could use to incorporate those three things into a novel to kind of amuse myself. Because I basically write to amuse myself. And I'm kind of lucky that what amuses me also seems to amuse a whole lot of other people. So I was watching Saturday morning cartoons one Saturday morning, and became taken not with the cartoons themselves, which I thought were kind of simplistic, but the commercials, which were really well done and showed real kids talking to cartoon characters like Tony the Tiger and Snap, Crackle, and Pop, and the Trix Rabbit and Captain Crunch, and nobody seemed to think that was odd. And I said, wow, what a great idea it would be if I could create a world where cartoon characters are real. What kind of a world would that be? So I spent a year just researching cartoons and the conventions of cartoons and what happens in cartoons and comic strips that doesn't happen in real life and couldn't, and the whole physics of cartoonism.
Right.
And then came up with a mystery, invented my private eye, my hard-boiled private eye, Eddie Valiant. I named him after my father. Eddie, and did the novel. And of course, I had a contract with Doubleday. They were going to print it, whatever I wrote. So I sent it to Doubleday, and they rejected it.
Oh, really?
First reject I've ever had in my career. I 50 short stories, 3 novels. First reject I'd ever had, and clearly the best thing I'd ever written. So I called my editor and I said, Sharon, why did you reject this? And she said, well, she said, it's funny. It's just brilliant. I said, I've never read anything like this, but it's so unlike anything that's ever been written before by anybody that I had to send it to the marketing department. I couldn't just publish it. I had to send it to the marketing department. They were the ones who rejected it. So I called the marketing department, and I talked to the head of marketing. I said, Chuck, what? Why did you reject this? He said, oh, I love this book. He said, this was so creative. He said, but there's no category for this on a bookstore shelf. I can't sell it. It's not a regular It's not a regular novel. It's not a science fiction novel. It's not fantasy. It's not a children's book. There's no category for this. I can't sell it. So I said to him, Chuck, what would you do today if somebody brought you Gulliver's Travels, uh, the Wizard of Oz, or Alice in Wonderland? What would you do with those? And he thought for a minute and said, I couldn't sell those either. So I went to my agent and I said, Bill, and my agent had a pretty good, easy time of it this far. All he did is, he had to do was send whatever I wrote to Doubleday and they'd print it and he'd get us 15%. And I said, Bill, what do I do here? If I can't publish this, I don't want to be a writer anymore. So he said, don't worry, we'll find some place for it. So he started sending it out to other publishers, other editors at other publishers, very often different editors at the same publisher, and it kept getting rejected, and always for the same reason. We can't sell this. Editors loved it. They'd send it to the marketing department. We can't sell this. And in the course of the process, it got rejected 110 times. So there were 110 rejections for Roger Rabbit. My wife used to call me going to the mailbox every day the daily disappointments, because there would be 2 or sometimes 3, one day 5 rejects in the mailbox. And finally, the manuscript landed on the desk of a woman at St. Martin's Press, Rebecca Martin, and she had just published a major bestseller for them. And so the president of St. Martin's Press gave her a vanity project. He said, look, Rebecca, you can print anything you want. The next book you see that you really like, you can publish it, So my book came across her desk just at that time. And she said, this is it. This is the one I want to do. So she sent it to the president of the company and said, here's the book. I want to edit. And you said I could edit anything I wanted. This is it. So he said, fine, I'll read it tonight. So he read it, came back to her the next day and said, Rebecca, I told you you could print, publish anything you wanted, but you can't publish this because I can't sell it. So Rebecca stepped up to the plate and said, either publish it or I quit. And they published it, although in very small quantities. They published, I think, 5,000 copies, which is maybe next to nothing. And if I could do one thing over in my writing career, the one thing I would do over is I would go back in time, and I would buy all of those copies because they sold for, I think, $1.99. And now if you can find one on eBay, it's well north of $375.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I've got I posted a book cover, which I don't know if this is an older version or a newer version, but it looks like you are on the cover of your own book. Is that?
It is.
That's
it
you.
It is indeed.
Okay,
it is
that's
indeed.
you.
And the way that came about, they wanted an author's picture. They had, I can't remember what they were going to use for a cover. I can't. But they wanted an author's picture. So I said, I'll give you an author's picture. So I had a company called Kamar do me a rabbit in the style that I saw Roger. And Roger, in the book, the original book, was a brown rabbit. So they made the rabbit brown. And they made me this adorable rabbit. And I dressed him up in a trench coat. I was in a trench coat with a hat facing him. I was Eddie Valiant. I was smoking a cigarette, and this is way before Photoshop. So in order to get the smoke, I had to really have a cigarette in my hand. I don't smoke, so the hardest part of it was that the smoke kept blowing at my nose. So I took the picture. The picture was black and white. I took it I sent it to St. Martin's, and they said, "Oh, this is way too good for an author's picture. We're going to use this on the cover." So they hand tinted it to make it look like it's shot under neon. They put it on the cover of the book. And if you buy the book, and I recommend you do, buy it in quantity, buy it in bulk. Valentine's Day makes a perfect.
Yeah, that's right around the corner.
Sweeties. Yeah. They uh, they did a book club edition. Doubleday did a book club edition of it. Yeah, and it went back to Doubleday, oddly enough, to do the book club edition, who'd rejected it in the first place. But they did a book club edition, and for the book club edition, they weren't allowed to use the same cover that St. Martin's had used on the original. So they did a new cover. They did a cartoon rabbit, which actually was pretty good. But they also did an artwork rendering of the detective, Eddie Valiant. And he looks a little like Robert Stack from Elliot Ness. He's much more rugged, certainly than I am, and craggily handsome. But they didn't change the sentence on the inside cover where it says the detective on the cover is portrayed by Mr. Wolf. And so whenever I'm at a conference or a science fiction convention or something like that, and somebody brings me one of those, they'll look at the cover and they'll look at me and they say, that's not you. That's not you. So the way you know that is an authentic autograph in one of those books, if you happen to find one, I will always draw a beard on the picture of that guy because he doesn't have one.
Ah, okay, that's funny.
You know, they for a book that got 110 rejects, got the book club edition, and then when word got out that Steven Spielberg was making it into a movie, Ballantine printed it as a paperback, and it went through 16 printings. I don't think it's in print anymore, but it went through 16 printings, sold millions of copies in paperback, and they changed the detective on the cover again.
Right.
And this one looks nothing like me, but it's okay.
Yeah, this is the one that I have. I put it up when I first saw your book. It's the one where it's like the L.A. City Hall's in the background, and Roger's got a word balloon.
And then I don't know, 6th or 8th edition. I don't know what edition they put it on, but they put on the famous occult classic. I love that.
Yeah, that's the one that's up there now. It says
that makes me the cult classicist.
Yes. Yeah. When I've read this book, I'm trying to remember if I saw the movie and then I looked for the book and then I read it and
that's the way it went with most people.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that sometimes you read a book and you go, wow, the book's so much better, or wow, the movie's so much better. But in this case, it was almost like there were two different. To me, it was like I liked some of the stuff in the book. They had word balloons. Your characters were like, it was almost like treated like a comic strip where the characters would stand in front of the camera and they'd, pose, and then someone would say something and the balloon would get bigger, and and then they take the picture, and that's how comic strips.
That's a pretty typical. Your response is pretty typical. The people who see the movie and read the book. The book is different than the movie.
Oh, sure.
It's different. It's got a different story. They maintain the same premise, cartoon characters in a real world, and they maintain the same characters. But the book is different. And people who read the book and see the movie like them equally, but for different reasons. The movie is visual. It just lays it out there, and you see what's going on, and you don't have to use your imagination. The people who read the book tend to be imaginative. They're generally readers, so they use their imagination, and they're used to using their imagination. And that's what I was looking for when I wrote the book. I wanted people to get into their own heads and visualize what this was like. I had a lot of fun playing with word balloons. Word balloons, of course, are something that cartoon strip characters in newspaper strips and comic books do that doesn't happen in real life. So in my book, the characters speak with word balloons, and you don't listen to them so much as you read them. And if the character turns around, his word balloon turns around too, and you're then forced to either learn to read backwards or where you have to go around and face him and front on. And if somebody gets shot with a cartoon gun, produces a bang balloon, and then you take the bang balloon, and they're very brittle, so you have to handle them carefully. But you take the bang balloon, and you can then compare it with a bang balloon from another gun and see if it's the same gun by the size and shape of the bang balloon. And if somebody plays a piano, a tuned piano, the notes come out,
right,
and they form a chain in the air, and people can grab that and cut them into 8x12 sheets, and that's where sheet music comes from. So I had a lot of fun playing with that. When they started making the movie, they wanted to use word balloons, and they tried. They tried early on. They tried, but it became obvious that this was not going to be practical. That you put up a word balloon and the action stops while the audience reads the word balloon. It basically made the movie into a silent movie with subtitles. So they couldn't do that. They did want to include one word balloon as an homage to me in my book. And so in a scene of Marvin Acme's funeral, where he is being carried in a coffin, and it's being carried by Clarabelle the Clown and all kinds of and Goofy and all kinds of cartoon characters. And as they're carrying his coffin, they start laughing. And because that's the way the tunes show their grief, they started laughing, and pretty soon everybody was laughing, and it was totally inappropriate for everybody to be laughing at a funeral.
Right.
And then they passed by Crazy Cat, and Crazy Cat was a cartoon and newspaper character back in the 30s and early 40s.
Right.
And he never spoke in any of his cartoons or in any of his comic strips. And as they were going by Crazy Cat put up a word balloon that said sob. And the word balloon turned to tears and came down and got him all wet. And that was the homage to my word balloons. But after they'd animated the scene, they had the whole scene done, and after they did the first cut of the movie, they decided they had to cut the movie because it ran about an hour and, 50 minutes, and they didn't really know if this was going to be an adult movie or a children's movie. And if it was going to be a children's movie, the rule of thumb is that you can't have a children's movie longer than an hour and 35 because they lose interest. So they decided they had to cut the movie so it was closer to an hour and 35, so that in case it was going to be a children's movie and not an adult movie, they got their bases covered. So they cut that scene, and there went my homage.
Oh well. I'm trying to remember that. Oh yeah, that was when he gets killed, and they don't even go to anything after that.
No, they don't go to
yeah. But
one of the to show you that there was another scene that got cut, and you can, if you know, you can kind of tell where it got cut because there was a scene where the weasels. Where Jessica bops Eddie over the head with a hammer, and the weasels take him and they bring him into Toontown, and you get the feeling that Jessica is somehow involved with Judge Doom and the weasels, and then they put a bag over his head and they take him out of Toontown and they dump him on the streets, and when he takes the bag off and looks in a mirror, he's got a pig head on. He's got a cartoon pig head. They call that being pigged. So he is in his office. He goes into his shower, and he washes off the pig head. And you can see the pig head going down the drain, all the paint going down the drain. And then he comes out of the shower, and he's wearing only his necktie and no shirt. And at that point, Jessica walks in. Now, if you know that scene got cut, the scene of going into Toontown got cut, and they went directly to Eddie coming out of his bathroom wearing no shirt and a necktie. And when you know what was missing, you think, oh yeah, I can understand why he's wearing no shirt and a necktie. He was in the shower and washed the pig head off. But if you don't know that, it's a little odd to come out of your bathroom wearing no shirt and a necktie.
Yeah, that is a kind of an odd scene, but you're so like, that's when Jessica kind of makes her move, and I think everyone just
Hmm.
forgets the
Yeah,
the
you do kind of
logistics
forget
of
it.
like, why is he standing there with his shirt off and a necktie, and yeah.
Yeah, you just kind of forget it.
Oh, that's funny. So when you wrote the story, you finally got it published, and then somehow, suddenly, it became a movie. How did that happen?
Magic,
Yeah.
Hollywood magic.
How'd
No,
you?
yeah. Well, one day, the book, the book, I sold the book in 1980. It came out in 1981, and it takes that long for books to come out. It's a long process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, takes about a year. So I sold it in early 1980. In mid 1980, now the book hadn't come out yet.
Mm.
So in mid 1980, I got a call one day, and guy on the other end says, "Is this Gary K. Wolf?" I said, "Yeah, it is." He said, "Well, this is Roy Disney." He said, "And I'm just calling because I just read your book, Who Censored Roger Rabbit, and I'd like to know if you would be interested in having Disney turn it into a movie."
Hmm.
And I heard this, and I said, "Yeah, right, Roy Disney calling me at home. Yeah, come on, get real. Who is this?" I figured it was one of my friends having me off here, and because they said, the book hasn't been released yet. He says, "Oh, well, it turned out that someone at the publisher,
Mm.
someone at St. Martin's," and I tried to find out who because I wanted to kiss him or her full on the lips for doing this, but I never found out. Somebody sent a copy of the manuscript to Disney
Mm.
saying, "Hey, I think that this would make a good movie and Disney would be interested in it." And it made its way up to Roy Disney, who read it and said, "Yeah, this is the kind of project we want to do." Now, you got to realize at this time, early 80s, that Disney was a kind of a second-rate movie house. They were making movies like The Nutty Professor and the Black Hole and the Black
Oh yeah.
Cauldron
Yeah,
that
that was
disappeared
pretty
down the
bad.
black hole. Yeah,
Yeah, it was.
and they were making really crap movies, and they had been offered E.T. and had turned it down.
Mm.
They had been offered Star Wars and had turned it down, and so they needed something that would prove that they were still a viable, top-notch movie production house capable of making blockbuster movies, and they saw this as being that.
Mm.
Plus, if you've ever been to Disneyland, you know that Disney makes a fair amount of money selling merchandise with characters on it.
Oh yeah.
Raincoats and lunch buckets and sweatshirts and whatever you got. And their characters were getting a little stale. They had Mickey Mouse, but he was kind of the corporate spokesmouse now.
Mm-hmm.
He was wearing a tuxedo and tennis shoes. And,
Yeah, that's right. In the '80s, he was very like he had a gold watch and he had like sports coat.
yeah,
It
still does.
wasn't innocent Mickey Mouse. He
Yeah,
was like
yeah.
yuppie Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they had Donald Duck,
Mm.
who they could steal merchandise, but nobody could understand what he said. So they needed new characters, and they saw Roger, Jessica, Baby Herman. They saw those as new characters they could use in their stable. So obviously they offered me more money for the rights to this than I had made on everything I'd written put together, and
Mm.
I of course accepted. I said, absolutely, give it a shot. I did not, in my heart of hearts, in my wildest imagination, ever think they'd be successful, because if you've read the book,
Yeah.
the book is a fanciful flight of imagination, and I did not think that they could ever turn the book into a movie without sacrificing every bit of the creativity that I put in there. I didn't think that they could. I suspected they could make a movie of it, but I didn't suspect they could make a good movie of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they started trying in 1980, and for a while they kind of proved me right. I mean, they just could not put it together. They just didn't have the horsepower to put it together.
Right.
At one point, they came to me and said, "Hey, look, we're having trouble with this whole live action animation thing. What would you say if we had the the cartoon characters be costume characters, kind of like they are at Disney World and Disneyland. What do you think of that? And I'm thinking to myself,
God.
Jesus, I'm going to wind up with Fred McMurray as Eddie Valiant, and Haley Mills as Jessica, Dean Jones as the Rabbit, and Kurt Russell as Baby Herman. I said, no, that kind of compromises the principle just a little bit.
Yeah.
That compromises the concept, and they agreed with that. So they went on and tried other avenues, and eventually, in the mid '80s, '85, a couple of things happened. Michael Eisner came in and took over Disney and brought a guy named Jeff Katzenberg with him. And Jeff and Michael had worked together at 20th Century doing a lot of stuff like Jaws and pretty big stuff. And they threw out all the projects they had going because that was what got the previous regime in trouble, but they kept Roger Rabbit. Michael said, this is the one project we have to do. We have to do this. And he turned it over to Jeffrey. He said, we have to do this and we have to do it right. So Jeffrey and Michael did something that nobody at Disney had done before, which was to bring in an outside producer. And the guy they chose was a little-known guy named Steve Spielberg. And of course, once Steve Spielberg gets involved, things just start to happen. And to show you what a difference Steve Spielberg makes in Hollywood, in 1980 or 81, Roy Disney went to Warner Brothers and said, we're making this live-action animated movie, and we would love to have Bugs Bunny do a cameo. He's going to come out, he's going to say, "What's up, Doc?" and he's going to be off. He's going to be on screen for 20 seconds. And Warner Brothers look at him and they say, "Get lost. There's no way is Bugs Bunny ever going to appear in a Walt Disney movie. It's never going to happen. Forget it." So 5 years later, Steve Spielberg goes into Warner Brothers, makes the identical request, and walks out with everybody. He gets Bugs Bunny. Excuse me. He gets Bugs Bunny. Don't you want Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner? How about Yosemite Sam? Here, take them all. So the only thing that Warner Brothers required was Bugs Bunny being a superstar. He had a contract, and Bugs and Mickey as co-equal superstars have to be in every scene together.
Right.
You cannot have a scene with Mickey without having Bugs in it too. And they also have the same amount of words of dialogue. So you can watch the movie, time it, and count the words, and you will see that they are on screen for exactly the same amount of time, and they both have exactly the same number of words of dialogue.
Wow. Yeah. Well, they want to keep them equal, I guess,
Yep. So that was part of the deal. Cartoon superstars have agents, just like Brad Pitt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I worked in advertising, and we had some things that we had to deal with sometimes because we had to show, if we were selling a product with the cartoon character, we had to imply that, no, you don't get the thing that, he's holding or something. That's part of him, but the other thing is the prize, And we had to, we had like a time thing where they say, oh, you can only show that for 8 seconds in a 30-second commercial. Otherwise, it implies that the toy that the little characters are coming out of, you get the little characters with that toy,
Yep,
so
right.
So it's a little legal thing that's happening, But by the way, you're talking about merchandise and everything, so I thought I would show you this. This is a couple things here. You probably have seen this before. But let me see if I can just. There we go. So I've got this, which is a Roger Rabbit doll here that's I'm showing on YouTube, and still got it. Now he's like 30 years old now, right? I mean.
Yeah. There are a number of them. They started making them the year before the movie came out. They started making them in 1987 and continued until I don't know, the 90s. They're making them through the 90s.
Yeah.
The really nice ones, the early ones, there's a little string on the back with a little pull a loop on it, a ring. You
I've
pull
got
the
that one
ring,
right here.
Yeah, you
The only
pull
thing
that.
about this one, his eyes have gotten really kind of odd looking over the years. They kind of, I'll put him
Yeah,
up there.
well,
He looks like he's been,
don't mind.
he's got
But
some
when you
cataracts or
pull
something.
it, I don't know, pull it.
Yeah,
and
yeah. Here we go. Let's
You will
see.
hear Charlie.
Still works.
That's Charlie Fleischer,
Uh-huh.
the voice of Roger Rabbit, and that is really his voice in the doll.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he says, yes, he's got about 5 things that he says.
Yeah.
And as the thing ages, the voice stops working, but yours is working pretty good.
Yeah, I haven't really.
If you pull it and don't let it go by itself, kind of hold it a little bit so that it goes in slower, the voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
that
not
sounds
speed it up.
exactly like Charlie.
Yeah, yeah.
That's Charlie.
Oh, well, he's saying the same thing.
There
It's
you
funny
go.
because I found a cat in a hat. Yeah, he's saying the same thing.
Makes me laugh.
Yeah, I actually had one which I found, which is a Dr. Seuss cat in a hat doll. It was just this ratty, beat up, just not, it's like, God, this is really messed up toy, And then when I pulled the string, it said the weirdest things that I don't remember the cat in the hat ever saying. It said stuff like, "Does your mother know I'm here?" It said that. It said, I remember.
Jackie in the hat.
Yeah, it was very odd. It was like, I don't remember the cat in the hat ever saying this. It's like, I like to be here. It said that, and then it said something like,
creepy.
yeah, it was very creepy, and it says, "Let's do something funny." It
I don't
said,
think I want that cat anywhere near me.
it's funny because I found it on eBay, and I just bought it because I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. I wonder what it says. It probably, whatever, But yeah, it said the creepiest things. Now the mechanism doesn't work as well, and it's like, kind of like that. So, but I did want to find out after how was it when you went to Hollywood and got to meet all these guys and see your film being made?
It was pretty. What can I tell you? It was pretty incredible. Once Steve Spielberg got involved, Bob Zemeckis, the director who had directed Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, and then, of course the Disney Animation Department, Dick Williams, who was the lead animator, Steve Spielberg, the producer, Kathleen Turner, who was the voice of Jessica, Chris Lloyd, who was Judge Doom. Once you start hanging out with these people, and of course the incredible Bob Hoskins, who was just an amazing actor and a wonderful man.
Oh yeah.
When you start hanging out with those people, it just gives you a real sense of accomplishment, because these people were taking something that I had written and making it into a visual medium and actually improving it. I mean, they were making it better than what I had written, and I was just in awe of that. I spent a lot of time at the filming. To be honest with you, filming kind of bores me because they do the same thing over and over and over again.
Right.
You take 163.
Yeah.
and my threshold of boredom is very low, so I spent a little time at the filming, which was done mostly in England, because Stephen likes the food there. Go figure. No, that's not true. They had a sound stage there. They needed a big sound stage. They needed a 3-story sound stage because the video monitors were on the first floor. On the second floor were the puppeteers who were manipulating the real objects that were on the sets, which were on the third floor. So they needed a 3-story soundstage, and those soundstages that large didn't exist in the United States at that time. They do now, but they didn't then. So they had to do it in London. They then did a lot of the special effects filming at Skywalker Ranch. They did the sound work at Skywalker Ranch, a lot of the special effects at ILM in California, and I enjoyed that more than the actual filming. It was more interesting to me, and I just loved hanging out at the animation department, both in England, where they were doing a lot of the animation, and Disney World, where they were doing some, and of course at the studio out in California. I just loved that because I loved hanging out with the animators. I loved watching them work. It was like watching a comic book get put together in like 3 dimensions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you went to England for this, so.
I did, yeah. And I mean, Disney treated me right. They put me up at the St. Regis Hotel, and he had a car and driver, and the car and driver was my car and driver. And I said to the guy, I said, if I want a pizza, you want to give me a pizza? He said, sure, I'll get you a pizza. I said, hey, can you take me to Harrods? And he said, sure, I'll take you to Harrods. So we went to Harrods, my wife and I, and we got out of our limo at the carriage entrance at Harrods, and I said to myself, if only all my high school buddies could be here right now to see me doing this.
Right.
Very happy guy.
Or that teacher that said,
Or that teacher.
Look at this dumb drawing here. It's well, look at that. Look at this.
Wish she had been there.
That's great. But all right. Well, yeah, this is great. So now this is like the 30th anniversary. Did we miss it already, or is it 30?
No, it was last year.
Last year.
We're creeping up on 31. Yeah,
wow.
Towards 40.
Yeah. That was amazing. I remember seeing it for the first time. Came out here for some other event, and somebody had passes to Roger Rabbit, and I had heard the name, and I was like, "What's that?" Oh yeah, and I got the worst seat in the plate. It was packed, as all the people that worked on it and stuff were there, and I was like right up front, like the first row, looking straight up. And it didn't matter. It did not matter. I still got the whole thing. And
great perspective on Jessica.
Yeah.
Yeah. It came out in 1988, and it was the highest grossing movie of 1988. Made I think $750 million, which was huge in those days. Won I think 6 Academy Awards, and I got to go to the Academy Awards ceremony where I sat close enough to share to smell her perfume, and it was one of the high points of my life. I cannot underestimate how much of a thrill it was that something I created has become a cultural icon. There are people. I went to China for 6 months, and I lectured at universities on filmmaking and animation. And people in China know the movie. People in China know Jessica Rabbit. The name that they use for Jessica Rabbit in Chinese, which I used to be able to pronounce, but I can't, is actually Big Melons. That is what they call Jessica.
Why was that? Why?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I didn't ask, but. I've been to Russia, and I've taken taxis in Russia, and I've seen Roger Rabbit dangles hanging from the rearview mirrors of taxi cabs in Moscow. And a friend of mine went to Uzbekistan. I think this is actually a place, and got a bootleg DVD of the movie there. So it's an international icon, and it's something that I created, working from like 4 in the morning until 7 o'clock when I had to go to work, working at my kitchen table in San Mateo, California, and I am just in awe of that.
Yeah. I mean, and also, to go through all that rejection and just, you didn't just call it quits. You just kept plugging it out there, and then eventually.
Well, the interesting thing was when I wrote the sequel novel, who plugged Roger Rabbit, which is also available on my website or on Amazon. And actually, there's a third one, Who Whacked Roger Rabbit, which I think is as good as the first one. But when I did the sequel, my agent sent that one out, and actually had a bidding war. There were 12 publishers bidding, published that one. All 12 of those publishers who rejected the first one once, 3 of them had rejected the first one twice, and one lucky devil had rejected the first one 3 times. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've got the Who Whacked Roger Rabbit up on the thing so everybody can see what that looks like.
And I'm on the cover of that one too.
Oh, I thought so. I was going to ask you about that next. So
yeah, I'm
there
on
you
the cover
are.
of that one. I'm on the back cover of Who Plugged. If you look at the back cover, you'll see me with Roger sitting in Benny the Cab. I try to make it a tradition to be on the cover of all my books.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and I'm wearing the same hat. It's a Borsalino.
Ah. Oh, okay. You've got the same hat on all 3 books?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I don't have the third one image of that one, but I've got the other 2, so you can see the before and after kind of the first one and then the last one, I believe. So.
Well, maybe not the last one. There might be another
Oh,
one.
that's good. Yeah, let's hope not.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's great.
They never.
So I guess you've been to Toontown and in Disneyland or Disney World.
I have. I was there for the opening. They had every major Hollywood star who was in town on that day there, and it's actually kind of surreal for me because it's like walking through my own imagination. I mean, they consulted with me when they built it, and there is not a right angle in the whole park, in that whole land. Everything is at an angle. There are no right angle corners in that whole land. Even if you look at the buildings, nothing has a right angle. And it's got all kinds of little things. Like if you step on the what do you call it? The hole in the in the ground. The manhole. If you step on the manhole, you can hear the weasels in the tunnels underneath plotting out how they're going to kidnap Jessica.
Oh wow!
And if you go into Minnie's house and look as you're leaving, you see Minnie's easy chair. And on the easy chair is a copy of Jessica's Secret, which is a kind of a Victoria's Secret catalog with Jessica on the cover. And as you're leaving, and if you turn around and look at Minnie's bookcase, you'll see a copy of my book on her bookcase.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, next time I go there, I'll definitely check it. I kind of got overwhelmed the first time I went there, it was like, wow, look at all the stuff. And it was nice because for little kids, they had a thing where it had the bars of a jail and it was rubbery so you can like pull them apart, little things like that. And a lot of gags that from cartoon, universe that actually they figured out how to make it work so no one would get hurt or anything. So that's awesome. So, well, this has been great. I'm so glad you came on here and to talk talk to us about your work and everything. I'm glad
anybody still remembers who I am.
Yeah. Well, they know your work. They've seen stuff. Now, I did want to find out. You do have another book here called all I could see is the latest one, or maybe this isn't the latest one, but it was called A Typical Day, which looked kind of interesting.
Yeah, Typical Day is science fiction. I still do my science fiction. I did Typical Day, which is all about a guy who gets up every morning and everybody in the world, you play a game and it takes you an hour. And you play the game and that takes you through your whole day in an hour. And then you go out and you live that day. And it's all controlled by a GameCube that you keep with you all the time. And it's all about a guy who loses his GameCube. And he thinks his life is going to get really worse, but instead it gets better. And then all of a sudden it gets way worse again. Interesting thing, they're actually making that one into a movie right now too. All my stuff is.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then there's one called The Late Great Show, which is a story about the Greek gods who have decided that they've become too irrelevant, so they move to mountaintop outside of Los Angeles, and it's all about Big Ben Bolt, who is Zeus, who has changed his name, and about his efforts to start an evening talk show to kind of get back some of his former glory. So yeah, I got all kinds of stuff going, and I'm working on one now that's so unique in its premise that it'll just even blow Roger Rabbit out of the water.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't wait to see that one. So, all right. Well, again, thank you again for coming on the Ambassador Good Time Ear Tango Radio Hour and talking to us today about
My pleasure.
Roger Rabbit and all that went into making that and other things. So yeah, thanks again. I'm really bad at. I've discovered doing like 11 episodes of this. I'm really bad at like endings because I just want to keep talking to you. but I have to end it officially, and I always notice now I'm listening to a lot of radio and they're very suave about well thank you Gary for stopping by and have a good time. And then
it's been my pleasure, and I hope that we talk again.
Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah.
There you go. Thanks.
So that maybe that's how I should do it, huh? So.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thanks again, and I'll send you an email about this and when it's going to be on, and it's already on YouTube right now, so you can listen to it there, and I'll probably edit it and put it back up.
Make me sound a whole lot more intelligent.
Oh, you sounded great.
Right.
I'm just going to cut me out, a lot of me.
Yeah, all right.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Gary, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye. Okay. So that was Gary K. Wolf of the Roger Rabbit, the inventor, the creator of Roger Rabbit. And yeah, I just want to get off of here. Let me turn this stuff off so I can say goodbye to you guys. Let's see, where am I? So it usually helps when you have people do this for you, but I don't have any. There we go. Hey, here we are. So I did want to show you guys, those guys who are out there still watching this on YouTube. Let me just pull this over a little bit. But this was a Roger Rabbit. Yeah, I was a geek back in the 80s, but yeah, it came out and I was like buying all this stuff when I had money. But this was the Roger Rabbit talking little thing, and he actually talks still. Let's see, what's this?
I know it's raining cats and dogs, I just stepped on a poodle.
Oh, there we go.
I know it's raining cats and dogs, I just stepped on a poodle.
He does say more.
Here's a magic trick, I pull a magician out of my hat.
Okay, what else?
Here's a magic, I just threw in, and boy, am I on fire!
Oh, that's so good.
I know it's raining cats and dogs, I just stepped on a poodle. My name's Roger, but you can call me Roger.
Okay, so there we go. That's what he says, and then we have this one over here. That doesn't say anything. It's just a nice little stuffed animal. His eyes are better though. Look at his eyes. Very nice. These eyes, I don't know. Tell me why. What happened? What happened? Too many late nights or something. I don't know. Maybe lack of oxygen. But there he is. Hey. Okay. So, and I didn't get to tell Gary, but I actually dressed up as Roger Rabbit. I made a costume, Halloween costume one time. And I was Roger Rabbit for Halloween, and had a big feet. I had a big thing on my head with the ears, big bow tie. I'm trying to find that photograph. I do not know where it is. It's one of those photographs that just keeps disappearing and pops up and it disappears. And right now it's in disappear mode, so I can't find it. And then I got this. This is kind of a cool thing. This was it's a flat piece of wood that someone had kind of put all these parts on, and I think they got this from a calendar or maybe just a photograph, and they just separated it and put it on a board here, which I really like, and like to figure out a way to make more of these. Not maybe this one, but something in a similar thing of like that. So okay, so yeah, jaundice, exactly. Thank you. Yes, that's what he's got. He's got some liver problems. Roger, his eyes. So anyway, if you want, just subscribe to the Animated Educated thing right there, or you can go to here and you can listen to us on, or just look for us on Facebook. We also have a website called Animated Educated. You can go there and look at, I'm going to put some stuff up about Gary, some of the photographs and stuff, and, all that. So we've got 4 people watching. We had 5. At one time we had 6, so I'm very happy that's a small number, but I'm glad you enjoyed that. So, okay, so I'm going to end this now officially and say thank you for tuning in. I'm not sure who we're going to have next week. I believe we are going to get, I'm trying to work on a guy named Mike Polvani who worked on Little Mermaid. He was an animator on that, and he's done other things, and I'm going to see if I can get him on the phone and come in and talk to us about animation and his career so far and all that. So that'll probably be happening next week at Tuesday from 2:00. That will be happening. And this show, Animated Educated, the Ambassador Good Time Ear Tango Radio Hour will actually be on every day at 1 p.m. and I believe it's starting to play at night at 10 p.m. So check your, that's when it's playing. So that's Pacific Standard Time, so that would be later where you are. Yeah. So, okay. So anyway, I want to thank Gary K. Wolf for coming in and talking about Roger Rabbit and all the stuff we talked about and all the stuff he talked about. And this will be edited and played on the Ambassador Good Time Ear Tango Radio Hour at 1:00 next Tuesday, February 19th. Is that right? Yes, February 19th. Yes, I got it. So, okay, is there anybody? There's someone that said they know who that person is. Oh, good. Okay, so I'm going to stop it for now, and thanks again. Long introduction, long ending, and we'll talk to you later. You can always email me at heyjimr@gmail.com. If you have someone that you know that's in animation or a writer or an artist or someone you think would be a really good guest for the show, let me know and let them know, and hopefully we'll get them on. And because I am looking for other guests. So, okay, so thanks again, and we'll talk to you later. Let's see. All right, thanks again. Thanks, Roger, for coming in. I want to thank you. Thanks a lot. Maybe we'll get Charles Fleischer to come on here, and he could do the voice of Roger Rabbit. Hey, Charles, give us a call at heyjimr@gmail.com. On the whole time? Oh, God. I hope it was. Wait, start recording. Stop recording. Okay, there. We're done. We're done? Yes? Okay, we're done. All right. I think that's it. Let's see. I'm still on here. Are we off? I missed that. Stop streaming.